So in this video, I'm going to show you how I do So in this video, I'm going to show you how I do ragdoll. Okay, I'm fine, nothing to see here, I meant to do that. Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how I do my ragdoll animation. Now it's quite complicated, so I give you two methods to do this. Now the first method is the simplest way, and that is to use Unreal's third-person character, Manny, because he's got a brilliant physics asset already built in, and then you can animate that character, apply your ragdoll, and then retarget that animation onto your custom FBX, and then you're done. Now the second way of doing it is for the purists out there, and that is when you take your digital double and then you set him all up for your physics asset, and it's a little bit more complex, and so I've left that to the end. So let's get on with the fun part first. So I've opened up Unreal 5.61 with a blank project, and into that I've added the third person template. So if you hit add feature or content pack, add third person template, add project. And the reason why is because in here, if you go to characters, meshes, and there's a skeletal mesh Manny and Quinn, I'm going to drag him into my viewport. And the great thing about this character is he's already got an amazing physics asset already sort of worked out for him, because it takes a while to kind of set up all those things. So I just wanted to kind of have fun, and this is like the quickest way of doing it, is that you use this character and then you retarget your custom character onto this, and that way you use all the animation from this, and so you have to set up all of those kind of physics assets. But at the end of the video, in the section 2, I will go over how to do it from scratch. It's just a bit boring, so I wanted to kind of get on with the fun part. So using this character, if we go into our main window here and we hit simulate, you press this button here. This is basically what happens when you're using the movie render queue or you're actually playing a game, is that Unreal uses all of its physics kind of magic. And when you're rendering with the movie render queue, it actually turns on this mode. So sometimes, well, it's always a good practice to just press simulate every now and again and see what's different. Because sometimes when you're kind of animating in your sequencer and you go, oh, looks good, and then you hit render, it turns out different, something weird happens. And it's because it's actually using this simulate mode. So we've got our character, and at the moment, nothing's happening, because we haven't turned on his physics simulation. So if you go into the character, I've selected him, I'm going to press stop. So I've selected my character, and then under here you've got, under physics tab, you go to simulate physics and you just turn that on. Now when I go into simulate, ta-da! Isn't that fun? So you press stop on that, and then he basically goes back to his default position. So the character is, I've put him over here and I put him up here like that. Now I press simulate again, and then he falls again. Poor guy. Now, one thing, if you look here, each time you simulate, the animation will be different. It's like a random seed on there. I don't know if there's a way of turning that off. That'd be great if you could. But for filmmaking, we don't want it to be different every time. We want the animation to be the same. So what we do is we'll bake that later on. Now I'm going to just look into the actual character himself and show you why I used the Manny character. So if you select your character, right mouse button, edit the mesh, and then in here, if you go over here to the physics tab, press that one, and then it's opened up the physics tab. Now in here you can see all of these constraints and collider objects. So we've got all these wonderful, like, it's all set up for you already. So like, I'm going to show you at the end how to set this up. But it's a bit more complicated because you've got to set the limits and the angles of each joint effectively, and then you have to create sort of collision objects for this stuff. And it's very doable, but it's just a bit boring. And I didn't want to start the video with like how to rig physics assets, because I would turn off myself. All right, so this is why I use this character. And then if we just go into here into the simulate mode, then you can see what he's doing, which is really fun. And then if I grab the shift right mouse button, you can actually drag him around and see how he's moving interactively, which is really fun. All right, so we're going to go back now and add some animation to this character before we apply the physics. So here we have our character, and we're going to create a sequencer and put some animation on him. So right mouse button, level sequence, And I call them ls underscore, and then we'll call this raggy. And now I'm going to save the level as well, because I haven't saved this level yet. So I'm just going to go File, Save Current Level As, and then I'm going to put it into that ragdoll test, and I'm going to call it P for persistent level, and then raggy. Okay, so now we've got our level, and now we've got our level sequence, and at the moment it's blank. So first thing I'm going to do is set my time rate, my playback rate, to 24 frames per second, because I'm doing motion pictures. And now we've got our character and we've got a sequencer. So I'm going to drag the character into here. So it defaults to adding the control rig, which is fantastic. So you can grab bits, so you can move things, and you've got inverse kinematics and all sorts of stuff. But for now, what I'm going to do is delete the control rig. You can add this back later, and we're going to add it as a layered control rig. Ooh, that's your hook for later on. Okay, so I'm just going to select that control rig and delete it. So there's our character, and we're going to give him some animation. So we go to animation, hit the plus there. And then some nice ones for jog. So type jog, and then we're going to go for jog unarmed forward. So hit that there, and he's added that animation at wherever I was. So I really should have been back at 0. If I can just drag it like that. Okay, so there's our animation, and then he runs out and he goes back to his default position. So this is designed to be loopable. So we press that like that, and there we go. There he is running and his loop. And then what I'm going to do is add a transform, because this is running on the spot. So we're going to transform. I'm going to go to my start frame. Then let's go and grab a position back here, set a key, and I'm going to set these to linear. Press that button there to save a key, and then we'll come over to the end, and then I'm going to set another key and then see how this feels. Okay, so he's going a bit slow, so I'm going to go into the animation curves here and then move my endpoint over there and then see how that feels. Oh, it's not bad. Right, so there's our animation. Brilliant. And then what we'll do is we'll have physics turn on during the simulation. So it'll calculate all of the inertia and all those things this character has. So what I'm going to do is you go into a character, and then you see you've got simulate physics, and then you hit a keyframe here, and then when I hit that, you watch in here, it'll add it into the sequencer. So there we go. So rather than having to navigate and find skeletal mesh components, simulate physics, it'll just add it by saving a keyframe. So now it's going to be permanently on when we press simulate. So now it's going to just turn on, but it's on right from the beginning before we've even moved him to that position. So what you need to do is have it off to begin with. So let's just turn it off here. So now when I press play, you see it's not going to work until it's turned on here in the sequencer. So if I go backwards a frame, it's using that last keyframe. It's all animation, and at this point physics comes on. And the nice thing is it's smart enough to know the inertia of the animation. So if I hit play now, so I'm in simulate mode, and I hit play, it should go forward. It's taking all of that weight and inertia and all those things, which is brilliant. So there we go. So there's our animation, and then if we watch, it's going to be slightly different. Look, his hand's there each time. So look, his hand's there this time. And for filmmaking, we don't want that. We want to bake all of this, and I'm going to go over that in a minute when we use the take recorder. We can also have it where he's interacting with another object. So let's have him run along here, and then we'll put some barrels at the end of it. So when he falls over, he'll bang into things. So I'm going to go into shapes and add a cylinder, and then let's put him a little bit here, and then I'm going to make him a bit smaller. So just scale him down. And then rather than having to place him like that, because I've got step mode on, I'm going to turn those off. Like that. Those are the things to lock. If you just hit end, it'll land on the nearest surface. Like that. So if you kind of over there, bonk, like that. Okay, so I'm going to add him here. Actually, let's make him a bit taller, so it'll be more exciting to when it falls over. Fun we have. All right, hit end. There we go. Okay, so now he looks like he'll collide with this, like that. So at the moment, if I was just to go into simulate mode, you see this doesn't do anything because it's not got physics turned on. So if I was to hit play here, and then he'll turn his physics on, but he's actually working as a collision object, so that's good. Stop play mode. I'm just going to move him a bit closer so that he's going to bump into him. Okay, now I'm going to turn on simulate mode and then hit play, and then he's going to go, ow! Oh, poor fella. See how to beat people up for fun. Doink, ow! Oh, that's not nice. All right. Okay, so I'm stopping the simulation and I'm going to select my object, there's my cylinder, and then if I go to physics, I'm going to turn on simulate physics. And so this now has, it also has like a default collider built into it, and they're not visible by default. So if you go into the little view thing here and you turn on collisions, and you can see all these assets, like this is the physics asset that I was saying about before, and these are all these shapes. So these are actually work as colliders, and then this one here, he's got his own physics asset collider. So I'm just going to turn that off because it's a bit ugly, but that's where you would find it, like that. Okay, and so now we've turned physics on. So if I come back to my beginning, if I press simulate now, that hopefully shouldn't do anything. There we are. But now if I press play, hopefully he'll, oh no, he's knocked it over. Oh. But it's not resetting because it's on loop. But if I press simulate again, ow, not simulate, simulate, it's trip, boink, doink. A little side note, I found a weird thing with animating a static mesh in sequencer for simulation. And that is, normally what would happen is we'd go to the frame just before our simulation, and then we'd select our model, save a key in the simulate physics, then we go to our start frame and then save another key so that it turns off. So there's no simulation, and then simulation would happen here. But if we press simulate and then press play, you can see you get weirdness. And that is because the transform is kind of competing with the simulation. And it doesn't do that with the Manny, but it does it with static meshes. So I don't know why. But the solution is to go to a frame before your simulation, right mouse button on this track, and then go to edit, trim selection right. And that will delete any animation after there. And then right mouse button, properties, when finished, you keep state. So that will mean that it's going to set this object to this position. Then after that, it's just going to keep it hanging there until this simulation starts. So now we've got simulation going, press play, and there it is. Oh, you know, that took me ages to work out. All right, back to the show. So now we've got our animation that we love, and we want to bake this so that it'll be consistent between renders in the movie render queue. Okay, and so to do that, we use the take recorder. So to find your take recorder, you go to Window, Cinematics, and Take Recorder, and then you dock that with your window here. And then the important thing is you need to add the things that you want to record. So we hit source and we say from actor, and then we're going to hit the Manny simple. So that's added it into the take recorder. Then we're going to add from actor our cylinder, because we want to record both of those. Now we also need it to add in our sequencer. So you have to go to source and then level sequence, and then select level sequence, and then you have to level sequence to trigger, and it's saying 0 at the moment. So again, you need to add the actual level sequence here. So there he is. So now it'll play this level sequence and it'll record the animation from these characters. So that's set up like that. And so we could do that. However, before we do that, there's some other things I want to turn off and change. So we go into the cog here, the settings, and then under here, the take recorder, let's move this one up. You've got some things by default. Record time code is on, and also record sources into subsequence. And thankfully it's remembered my settings. But when you open up the tape recorder, these will be on. And what will happen is you see your frame numbers here. it'll actually record these frame numbers. So when your animation is recording into the new take, it'll be like miles away over there. And you're like, where is the animation? And it's like over here. But then like these numbers are like 1 hour, 14 hours. You can see what time is it now? Oh, it's 2 o'clock. Yeah, there we go. So you can see what time of day I recorded this. So we want to change that here just to turn record time code off. And that saves you a lot of pain. And then also record sequences, sources, record sources into subsequences. Okay, turn that one off too, because what will happen is for every item you'll have another subsequent sequence and another one, rather than putting them all in the same sequencer. Now this take record sequencer at the moment will be called this name, scene 1 take 0. So you can change the name there, and it's going to put them into root take save directory. It'll save them into cinematics and takes. So it'll make a directory under content browsers called cinematics takes. So you can change them to wherever you want, but I just leave it as default. But those are the main things to change, just to make your life a lot easier. And then the other thing to change is the playback rate, which is this one, and then the frames per second. And that's because when you're recording at 24 frames per second, it's basically saving a key in the take recorder every 24th of a second. But with your animation and your physics, it's actually running at like as fast as it can go, like 240 frames per second, or as fast as Unreal can run its little legs. So often you'll get like jitters and weird things like that, and it'll look fine when it's playing it, and you go, this is great. But when you load up the animation, things will be doing this and that, because it's kind of rounding out to the nearest frame, whereas in reality, it's got a lot more frames in there. So you can set that to the maximum as 240, because this subsequencer, the frames, the keys are time-based rather than frame-based, effectively. So you can bring in a 240 frames per second sequencer into your regular 24 frames per second sequencer, because it's just looking at the real time of 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, rather than frames. Anyway, so that's a good one. Now, the other thing to be aware of as well is it's going to record this animation in real time. So if you've got a really heavy scene and it's chugging along, the animation will be, and it'll record it like that. So so make sure that your sequence will play at the highest frame rate that it can. A couple of tricks are to just go into unlit mode. That's always a fun one. And the other thing is here, so this is your time dilation. But basically, if you can record this at half speed, so I tend to set it at 0.5, and what it'll do is actually calculate all the simulations in half speed. It looks the same, but it's just got more data, and it's kind of simulating it back in slower, and it calculates how to do it cleverer, whatever. All right, so I think we're ready now. The important thing to do, this is really important, I'm going to put big letters, press simulate mode. It took me ages to work this out. The other day I was like, everything's right, why is it not working? And it's because I was trying to record it without simulation turned on. Well. All right, so then you hit the big red button here, and now it's going to do a countdown, and it's going to play that animation. You see it's playing at half speed, and and here it's recording all those frames, and then you stop it when you're kind of ready, and I'll say stop there. So now I've got a recording, and here it's saying pending take, starting to do a new one. So if I want to see this take that I just saved, so you go into your content browser, and then you go into your cinematics, your takes, and your date, and then you've got your sequencer here. And if I try and play this back at the moment, it's got the two things loaded. So if I just press stop simulation, so now it will play my actual animation like that. So this is a sub-sequencer, and it's spawning these things. That's why we're getting two of everything. It's because we've got this all open, and you see we've got our Manny simple, got a cylinder, and our Manny in here. And then when I've opened up this sequencer, these are actually spawning. That's what that little lightning bolt means. It's actually grabbing this from the content browser, not from the outliner. Anyway, that's just an interesting fun fact. So say we're happy with that. Well, say I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy. I don't like that one. I hate it. Okay, so I'm just going to kill that sequencer, and I'm going to go back into my tape recorder. And let's try it again. Go into simulate mode, press record. Dun 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 dun. Beauty. Okay, so now I'm going to go into Take Browser, go into my sequencer, and turn off simulation. And so this is the one that is recorded, and it's spawning these objects. And this is what I was saying here. So you've got like a cylinder, and he's got a transform. So it saved keys for all of your transforms. Let's go into here. So there's my transform, there's my animation for that, and then for the character, let's go back to the sequencer. If we look at our character, we've got our FBX animation, and then you've also got a transform for him. So here's our transform. And so this simulation is relative to this transform, and you can bake them into the same thing, but I don't know if we need to. I'm going to probably do that at the end because I don't want to bore you too much. And what I want to do right now is to just kill the animation after a certain frame because he's doing a little bit of like wiggling. So I'm going to select the animation, right mouse button, and then edit, trim selection to the right. So that's removed any animation to the right. I know he's disappeared, I'll come back to that. And while I'm here, I'm going to select the transform and do the same with that one. So right mouse button, edit, trim selection to the right. So now he stops at this frame and he goes back to his default position, and that's set in here. So if you go to the animation curve, right mouse button, go to properties, and then here it says when finished it'll change to the project default, and the default must be restore state. So we change that to keep state like that, and then just click in that window there. So now he'll stay in his state, and the same for the animation here. So right mouse button, properties, when finished, keep state. So now he will just stay there. Now look, he's totally not moving. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So that's number one thing that I wanted to fix. Now the other thing is, if we want to do some animation on top of this, at the moment we are all locked to the FBX animation. And so how to add additional layered animation on top of your animation sequence. So what we do is we select our character, and then we go to plus control rig, and then you turn on layered control rig, and that will make it an additive control rig. Otherwise it will be binary. It'll be on or off, and it'll overwrite everything in the sequencer. So you hit layered, and now you can use the mannequin that comes. This is another great reason to use Manny, is that he comes with this wonderful control rig. So let's just go and select that. And if he didn't have that, then you would add the FK control rig. Every single FBX skeletal mesh has an FK control rig, and that's just the joint rotations. So we can add either of those. In fact, let's just do, I'll make it really simple. I'm just keep to the FK control rig. So now here in the outliner, in the anim outliner, you've got every single one of your bones, and you can edit these. So let's go and find, say, his head. And I can click here. Is that closest? There's your neck. There's his head. So now I'm going to go into rotate mode, and then let's just save a key like that. So let's save a key here. So then you add a keyframe, and I'm going to change my keyframes to cubic. Let's just do cubic. All right. So hit start there. So there's my default position, and so there's his head there, and I can make him look a different direction. And this is adding that animation on top. I'm going to hit save a key there, or to make it easier, I'm just going to add the auto key, which is that one. There we are. So now there's my head there, and then let's have him look more towards camera at the end like that. There we are, and it saved a key for me. So now, boom. Oh, ow. So at this point, you're ready to retarget this animation onto your custom character. But now this is optional. I like to take my transform and bake that onto the actual animation track. So at the moment, you've got an FBX animation, and you've got a transform. And if I turn off the transform, you'll see what's happening to the animation. So he's running on the spot. Because this animation started as a loop and we had to add a transform and we were animating him along, when he comes to a stop and the simulation starts, that's done relative to his root position. And so you've basically got a counter animation. So if I turn this back on, you've got both of them and you don't notice it when you're actually playing it. So, you know, again, it's optional, but I don't like to have the two things going. So what I like to do is combine the two together. And all we have to do is select our character, right mouse button, and then we say bake animation sequence, calling it a bakey, and then hit OK. And then it comes up with some options. And the important one is to enable record in world space. So that is off by default. So we hit OK on that one. And then we hit export to animation sequence. Press OK. And there it's done it. So it's very quick. So now we can delete all of this animation because it's all combined into one. So I'm going to stop this, go to my first frame, delete my transform, delete my control rig, delete my skeletal animation. And then hit plus, animation, and then we go to bakey. So you can see that he's really small and far away, and that's because he's got a transform still on him in the outliner. So we basically need to reset that. So we just hit reset, and now he's back to his position. Look at that, nice and clean, love that. So now we're ready to take this animation and retarget it onto our custom character. So this is the character that I made in Character Creator 4 as my digi-double for doing my ragdoll simulation. And then what we're going to do is take the animation that we just made and then retarget that animation onto this character. So we go and find the animation, a right mouse button, retarget animations, and then we choose our target skeletal mesh, which is the character I just showed you. And now you down here, you pick a animation sequence, and then you can see that it's automatically retargeting it, which is fantastic. Thank you, Unreal, for writing that. Now, it's not quite bang on, but you can now export a retarget asset and then customize that to be much more closer up. But I'm not going to do that in this case, because what I'm going to do is make adjustments in the animation with a little bit of fine tuning with another layered control rig later. Now we go to export animations, put them into place, give them a name, and then hit export. And then I just say export. And now that character is completely ready to use in whatever animation you want. And since it's got the transforms applied to the root position, then there's no messing around having to kind of slide it and to make the looping animation look correct. There we are. Fantastic. Hooray! So here's the animation that we did earlier. I'm going to use this just for the cylinder. So I'm going to stop the animation, delete my Manny character, and now the cylinder will animate on its own magically. That's a ghost. And we're going to bring in the character we just made. So go to Content Browser, bring in the character, and then I'm going to set him at 0, 0, 0, because all of our transforms are now in his animation sequence. So there's our character. We're going to drag him into the sequencer. And now we're going to go to frame 0, 0, 0, make sure I'm there, hit animation, pick our animation, and hit play. And he should, oh, poor guy. Now, I'm going to just fine tune this a little bit, like his head is kind of intersecting the ground. And I'm going to do that by adding a layered control rig. So we select our character, hit the plus button, go to control rig, make sure layered is enabled, and then pick the FK control rig. And so in the animation outliner, I'm going to find his head and then select rotation and then navigate to where I want it to start from. So he's good there. I'm going to save a key. So go to the head and then save a key and then go to my next frame. Let's pull him up and let's rotate that around like that. There we go, and save a key there. And then move to my next not really a frame. That's one thing as well, is I'm still in 240 frames per second, but it doesn't actually matter what that is because this is time-based. So I'm going to change it to 24 frames per second. And all the animation is exactly the same because it's just now subframe. There we are. So now we're all ready to go into the movie render queue and render away. And every time we render, it'll be the same animation. Et voila. So this is my preferred method of working. It's much simpler and it's easier and quicker and job's done. But now I'm going to show you in part 2 how to do it properly, where you take a custom character like this guy and we're going to give him a physics asset. It took me about 3 times as long to make part 2 as it did part 1. But hey, that's what I'm here for. Now I can go and refer to that next time I need to do it. So hooray, brilliant. Now, if you want to support the channel, then subscribing really, really helps. And then you won't miss another video. And if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. So part 1 was using my preferred method of taking the Manny character, animating him, adding physics, porting that, and then retargeting a custom character to that animation. And that's what I did for the opening scene with me running along the beam. This part now is more for the traditionalists who like to do things in a more complicated way. I mean, it makes more sense if you're doing a character that's going to be in a game or you're using this character again and again and again, then this is really the way to do it. But it's a bit more of a pain. And I'll show you how to do it. All right, so when you bring in your custom character, and this guy came from iClone, if you go to right mouse button, create and physics asset, this is what happens automatically when you import a character that doesn't have a physics asset. So you'll see, you know, when you bring in a character, it'll say skeletal mesh, skeleton, and then physics asset. And it basically runs this little tool. So you go to create, physics asset, create, and then it brings this in, and I'm just going to say, okay, create asset. And this is what it gives you. And so you've got in here, you've got effectively for each joint that you decide, you've got an angular limit, and then you've got a collider object that attaches to that bone. And so when that moves around, it'll collide and it'll stop. And then the way that it moves and its limits are all based on that constraint. Okay, so effectively what we want to do is make sure that these bones are in the right place, or these colliders fit the bones that we want, and that these angular limits are set in the correct way. Because by default, if I just pressed simulate right now, if you go up here to these 3 little lines and go to simulate, you'll see that, you know, he's less than perfect. So a way to move this character around is if you hit shift and then the right mouse button, you can drag parts of his body and see how he works. So yeah, it's you can see why I like to use the Manny skeleton. Okay, to stop it, you can go up here and hit simulate, and that stops it. And an alternate way is if you use the hotkey Alt-I, and then that makes it simulate. Alt-I stops it. And when we get into the simulating the angular limits, you can actually select one of these constraints, and then you hit Alt-Shift-I, and then it'll simulate just from that bone down. You can see some weird things are happening with the arms, and that is because these bones aren't exactly in the right place. And the colliders look like they're in the right place in 3D world-ish. But if you look down here, and you can see some of the names, like you've got spine, lower arm, hand, that makes sense. But then you've got upper arm twist. And here you've got another twist. And then on the face, you've got this facial bone rather than neck. So it's kind of attached, or it's kind of guessed at where it thinks these bones should go. But that's the problem with using the default one, is it doesn't put them in the right spot. So our job is to kind of go through and delete the ones that don't work and add ones that do work. And one of the things that you can see right away is that these aren't exactly oriented in the right direction of where your bones would be. So what I do is when I come in, I'll kill this one and start again. So I'm just going to delete this physics asset. And then I'm going to select my character, right mouse button, create, physics asset create. And then down here, when you've got the new physics asset creator, turn off auto orient to bone. And now when you create this asset, these things will be lined up along the bones. So that's the easiest thing to get you started. Also, if you want to type in the values manually of any of these bodies, what you do is you go under Body Setup, Primitives, and then in this case it's a capsule. So you open that up, and then mysteriously it's under Index, and you open that one up, and then in there is you've got your values that you can type in and mess things up and whatever you want to do. Well, let's have a look and see where these colliders are on the skeleton. And to do that, we go down here to the cog, and then we go to Show All Bones, and this will list all of the bones on the hierarchy, and then it shows you where these things are parented to. So it's like, all right, spine 1, that makes sense. Spine 3, that kind of makes sense. And then what we got here, lower arm, that makes sense. Upper arm, there's nothing there. And so this object here is actually on upper arm twist, and that's something that you've got in the iClone for doing, and maybe for jiggle weights or something. I don't know, but that's the thing. You have to go through your character and see where the bones are, and are they in the right spot. So one way of seeing the bones themselves is if you go into this little eye here, then we go to bones, and then all hierarchy, and that will show that all my FBXs in there. You can see, like, you know, extra sort of weird bones here that it might have associated it with. But now we're going to go and make this a little bit smaller because it's a bit big. Let's make that smaller like that. Okay, so now if I select one of my arms, so we've got upper arm twist, and then this is actually attached to the upper arm. That's why it was kind of doing something different to this arm. So I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to delete that one because they were both wrong. And I'm going to just make that one smaller. So I'm going to use these transforms up there, and then it's basically got the length, and then on the side ones are the circumference. So that's how you change your capsule size. And then I'm going to assign my own capsule to this bone. And the way to do it is to do it in the hierarchy, so you know exactly what you're grabbing. So I'm going to grab my upper arm, and now I'm going to say, go over here and say add body, and it's going to add a capsule, and it's not going to orient it. So we're just going to hit add bodies. There we are, and it's added it here. And for some reason, in this case, it's coming in very small. So I'm going to zoom this up. And then another thing that I found is I think I want to kind of scale it by clicking on that. But I have to unselect it and then reselect it, and then it allows me to scale it. So I think by default, it's grabbing something else, but I don't know what it is. Okay, so I'm just going to scale it up and then scale this one here to make it look more bony shaped. And now I'm going to orient this along that axis. So let's go into rotate, and I've got this set to 90. And we hit rotate. Doink. There we are. Scale it back. Okay, so now we've got something that looks more like the upper arm, and then is actually on the upper arm. So now if I select this joint and then hit Alt-Shift-I, you see now that arm's swinging more how you'd expect an arm to swing. So that's good. So now we're going to go through and basically go through the rest of the model and check each one. So I'm going to do the same on this other arm. So I've got the upper arm left, that's done. Then we're going to go to the upper arm right, and I'm going to add another body there. So add in a body, and then unselect, reselect, and then just start scaling it up. And then something you can do is if you select this body and then right mouse button, copy properties, you can paste those properties, right mouse, paste properties onto it, and you can see it here, it is there. That can save you some time. So now we've got two of these, and I just press Alt-Shift-I. See, now that's acting a bit better. Now, one thing I want to do here for the hands and the feet. So I want to change these from capsules to cubes, because a capsule will kind of roll around on the ground, whereas a cube's a better shape for a hand, and the same for the feet. So we're going to change this primitive type here to box, and with this selected, I'm going to generate new bodies. So we've pressed it there, and I'm going to just move it I'm not sure why I have to unpress and press, but as I said at the start of this, I don't tend to do it this way. I tend to use the Manny skeleton. So my knowledge of physics asset is pretty limited, but it's been fun making the video because it's a good excuse to kind of delve deeper into it for myself. And I've learnt a bunch of things, so I always like making these videos. So hopefully you're learning something too. And if this has been of use and of value to you, then how about giving it a little like and maybe ask a question in the comments, because that really helps. So thank you. All right. So we're going to do the same for the feet now. So he's kind of working a bit better. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is now give him some angular limits. So he'll act more like a human made of flesh and bones. Okay, so now we're at the exciting part. This is the angular limits. So here we have our angular limit, and it's set down here. And this one, it's all round, and it's set to 3 at the moment. So which means that if I press it and then do Alt-Shift-I, you'll see that it's just moving freely wherever it wants to. But we want to kind of limit it so that it won't go through his chest or go too far forward or back. So to kind of basically give each of these joint constraints the kind of angular limit of a real human. So what we do is we go from free to limited, like that. So we're going to change all of these from free to limited. So now if you'll look at it, it's got like a different setting for your swing. It's basically your X, Y, and Z. But it's kind of hard to understand what's what. So what I do is I just turn 2 of them off and I'll just have 1 on like this. And so that's my angular limit. I'm going to get into here. And at the moment, the bone is oriented along this line here. And you see this line here, that's the direction of the bone, even though it's going this way and that. They work either way, they work the same as long as that's perpendicular to your bone. But I like to orient this so it's pointing down my bone. So you go and you select your constraint and go into rotate, and then you rotate this in the the axis that works best. And I've got my 90 degrees on. Okay, so I've angled my red. So my swing limit is basically my X, red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. So that's my swing limit. So at the moment, if I was to leave this at like 180 degrees, so this will be able to swing all the way around here like that. So Alt-Shift-I, so you can swing that way. And if I use my Shift button, you can see it's going all the way up there like that. Okay, Alt-Shift-I. Now, if we change this to say something much less, now he's only going to be able to swing in that one axis for that distance there. So you see he's kind of locked now. So I'm doing Shift and right mouse button, and I can't go any higher than that. So what we're going to do is make this a bit wider, like that. Now, I say I wanted 180 degrees, but at the moment he's going to go through here. The arm's going to go into his chest. So what I want to do is move just the red part, but leave this red arrow facing down the bone. And it's weird, I don't quite know why, but if you hold down Alt, then you can rotate. I'm going to turn off my snapping. So you're going to rotate this limit here using Alt. So now it'll swing from here to here. But this arrow is still pointing down the bone. Now, I'm not 100% sure, or even 12% sure, why that does that. What the difference is between rotating this, you see the whole bone goes with it and the orientation. And it just kind of gets confusing. So I'm not quite sure why it does any of that. But I just know that if you hold down Alt, and then it lets you move this relative to that. Because if you look at all these bones, they're all facing by default along the joint, the real joints of the skeleton. And so, yeah, Alt and grab your line. So now we've got one axis that's working. So now he's going great. He's sort of stopping where you kind of think he should. to about there. That's his limit. I can't go any further than that. That looks pretty good. Okay. Alt-Shift-I to stop that. Now I'm going to just move around this way. And now we're going to try our next axis. And then I'm going to just do one at a time. So that was 92. So we'll think 92. We'll remember that. And then this next one is this direction. So this will show you how far it will swing that way. So now if I do Alt-Shift-I, you see he can't move down. He's only going to move left and right. And then I'm holding Shift just to drag it so he can go that far forward and that far backwards. Very good. And now the next one, again 95 he was, and the next one is the twist limit. So the twist will be the rotation around itself. So if we just Alt-Shift-I, and now there we go. You can see that he's kind of constrained. Basically, he can twist along his shoulder, but I can't move him any other direction. And then the magic happens when you add all three. So we were at 90, 92, and then the other one was something like 95, wasn't it? And now, if we do Alt-Shift-I, this arm will move back there and back there and back wherever I want the arm to go. That twist's a bit heavy. Let's go and limit that. I think that's too much of a twist. I'm going to... Oh, why did he end up at 65? That's way too big. All right, I don't want his arm to move that much. There we are. That's better. That feels a bit more, yeah, natural. So now we're going to move on to the next joint. So I'm going to select him. I'm going to press F just to frame it. And then you can see this axis is going up that direction. And you can leave it like that if you want to, but I don't. I want to be consistent. So I'm going to move. I'm just going to rotate him so he's facing down that way. And then I'm going to change my swing limits to 0, 0, 0. And let's just do the first one. So where is his elbow? It's along here, isn't it? Okay, so if we were now to do Alt-Shift-I and then right mouse button. Okay, so he's out breaking his arm that way, so he doesn't want to go further than that, and he wants to come up this way. Alt-Shift-I. So I can then press Alt and then orient this round. Let me go and turn off my snapping. There we are. So now that looks like how an elbow would bend. So let's give it a try. Alt-Shift-I. So we want it to be able to go fully extended. And so I'm going to hold Alt and move this around like that. Now it feels pretty good. Now we want to give him a bit of a twist motion. So what was this? Was 52, 53. Make that 0. And then what's this one here? So that would be a little bit, let's see what it does. Let's put it up here like that. Alt-Shift-I. Yeah, I do a bit of that one. Let's just make that 10. And then we'll make our twist limit 5 because we don't really want that twisting much. And then we'll back to whatever that was. What were we? Let's go 66. Alt-Shift-I. And then right mouse button. Let's move him like that. And let's get both of these working at the same time. So Alt-Shift-I. Grab that joint there. Alt-Shift-I. That's not too bad. And I'm going to do the same with the hand. So I want to make sure my bone is oriented facing the direction it's going. And then this one looks like it's the up and downy. So let's see what it does. That's pretty good, actually. But that far, yeah, that'll do. So I'm going to go through the rest of the model now and assigning my angular limits. So I've been through the model and set all of the angular limits on all of the joint constraints. And now I want to set the target orientation and target velocity of all of the joints. And that's effectively the springiness and the stiffness of all of your joints. And that is under angular motor down here at the bottom of my details panel. And you've got target orientation and target velocity. So target velocity, let's turn that one on, and we're going to turn on the one that says slurp. So if I just do Alt-Shift-I, you just sort of see how loose that arm is at the moment. Now if we want to make that stiffer, you change this dampening under target velocity. So if we make him something like 50, now I do Alt-Shift-I, you can see he's got a bit more like that. And if I make him 100, Alt-Shift-I, then it's pretty stiff. So now, if I try and move him around with the Shift right mouse button, so you can see he's a little. So it needs a bit of oil. Okay, so that's your stiffness. Turn him off, and now we've got the target orientation, and that is, you see the disc here, and you see these angles. You know your X, Y, Z angles. Along this line here is effectively your target orientation. So if we turn this on and we set it to the default, well, it's 50, right? So if I go Alt-Shift-I, see what happens to that arm. It's getting a bit springy because it's trying to go back to the perpendicular value of here. So if I'm going to make it stronger, let's make it 1,000. Now press Alt-Shift-I. You can see he's going. Hello. He's right up. He's right along that line now. It's right in the center of those. Of that orientation of that our angular limits. So you can see that's where it's trying to aim to, and that's our springiness. That's where our spring's pointing, and that's how strong your spring is. So we go Alt, and then move this around. He's going to go doing, doing, doing. And so, if we just Alt-Shift-I it, I'm going to make this something like 100. No, let's make it 500. And then also going to turn on the dampening as well and make that 50. Alt-Shift-I now. So now it's getting a bit stiffer. And so we're going to make this one 100. So this is how bendy our spring is, which is really good. I mean, it's really useful for hard-bodied sort of surfaces, and say you've got robots and machines and things that need to kind of have springs rather than people. That's not so good. But we're going to give this a value of, say, 50 in the spring and 10 in the dampening. So this should be a bit more. There we are. It's a little springy and. It is fun. It is a lot of fun. It kind of makes me think I could be doing some puppeteering with this stuff. So now we've done the stiffness and the springiness. There's one last step, and that is stopping the limbs from intersecting themselves when they go into the physics mode. So in the real world, we bump into ourselves, but if we were to just press Alt-I at this point, and we were going to grab his arm, and at the moment, it's going to pass through his body. So we don't want that. We want it to collide with it. So we have to set up our collisions. So we go Alt-I. And then sometimes when you were modeling this, or when we first started out, you'll see some of these are purple. That means there's a relationship, a collision relationship with them. So what we're going to do is just clear off all of these collision relationships first. So we grab the pelvis, shift to the end, and then hit at the top here, we've got enable collision and disable collision. So we're going to hit disable collision. So now whichever one I grab is going to be this nice blue color, which means there's no relationships. So we want to tell, for example, the forearm not to penetrate that this bone, this bone, this bone, and this bone, or this collision object. What you kind of think what you should be able to do is just select all of them. Just grab. You have to have the sound effect. Grab. Say that. And then say collision, enable collisions. And we say, oh, okay, that'll be good. And then if we press Alt-I, whoa, what is going on? And it's because these objects are intersecting themselves. So if they're trying to intersect, they'll try and push themselves out like that. So this one here that's inside this one will try and push itself away, but it can't. So all the joints and everything just go mad. Now, the way to tell where those self-intersecting objects are, if you go into the little viewer mode here and then go to bodies and then highlight overlapping bodies, now it's showing you like these are all red, which means that's not good. Okay, so we're going to select them all again and then just disable collision. And so, for example, this object here and this object here, they're both intersecting each other. So if I hit enable collision now, you'll see that it's red. So we can't do that. So what we need to do is create collisions between objects that aren't intersecting each other. So you have to kind of do it in steps. So we'll grab the forearm and we're going to say this forearm is going to collide with this object, with this object, with this object, with this object. I'm worried that these two might be intersecting each other, so we're not going to select them at this point, and these two might be intersecting each other. So you've got to kind of do them independently of each other. So we're going to grab the feet as well. So I think these should be all separate enough to create a collision. So we're going to hit enable collision, and then we're going to do the same for the hand, and we're going to say this hand will collide with, it's probably not going to hit that one, so it'll collide with this and this hand here and the head. And even though the head has now gone, these things are highlighted, it's okay because we're just creating the relationship between these highlight blue ones. So we're going to select that one and that one and what else? So let's try that one. There we go. Was he? Yep. So these are all separate from each other. I'm going to hit enable collision. Okay, now we're going to make this hand collide with the feet as well. Enable collision. We're going to do the same with this hand. Collide, collide, enable collision. Now we're going to select him and collide with these. Enable collision. And then this one is going to collide with that one. Enable collision. And then see at the head, these two are, no, you see, they've already got a collision set up because the enable collision isn't enabled. So that's how we know that we've already set one up. So let's have a look at those two. See, let's hit enable collision between those two, and then those two. Let's collision between those, and let's try that. So Alt-I, and so now if I was to grab the arm and pull it through here, you can see now that leg, it's not able to go through that leg. So there we are. Now we can throw him around, bounce him about, and have some ragdoll fun. So next we're going to take this character and we're going to put some animation on it and close it all out. Great. So a quick thing, when I created that physics asset, I didn't assign it automatically to my character. So if that happens to you, what you do is you go and find your character here, and then you right mouse button, and then you edit it. So then you go into the mesh, and then under here, under asset details, you go down to the bottom, and that's where you assign under physics asset, that's where you assign your physics asset. So you select that one, and now when you come out of this, now that will be assigned to this. So then when I press simulate, he will now have that asset. And then one thing I thought was, you can change, so you can make multiple physics assets. And so if it's got exactly the same naming between characters, and say like this is an iClone character, so if I brought in another iClone character, I'm thinking that I should be able to just retarget the physics asset onto it, or just choose that same physics asset. But I thought, let's try and see what happens if I go and use the one that exists for the mannequin. So it's like, I wonder what happened there. So if I now assigned that one and I press simulate, ta-da! So you can see it's not quite working. All right, so that was good because I thought right at the end, oh no, look, if I would just press that, everything will be done in one move. But alas not. All right, so I'm going to do a recap now. In summary, so we have our character, And in this case, I've built a physics asset for that character. And now I'm going to make a sequencer, cinematics, a level sequence, open that up, drag my character into there, give him some animation. I don't know if I've got any in here. Oh, I've got this retarget thing. Here we go. So yeah, so we've got this animation. He's already got that in there. So we'll use it up to this point, and we will put something here. So we'll have another object. So we'll bring in, we'll go and add a cube. Bring him here, and he will have a physics asset like that. And then what I'll do is I'll slam this cube into him. Bring the cube, put him in the sequencer, save a key. Boom. Okay. So now at this point where he's just about to hit him, I'm going to turn on simulate. So you go to select the character, and then you can add a keyframe here. That's the easiest way. And then we're going to turn off simulation here by turning that off. So now he will play and then simulate at this point. So we must go into simulate mode. Right, and boom. Oh, there we are. Hooray. Not R-rated. So you can have a lot of fun. I'm loving this. I'm thinking, oh, that's perfect. Great. An amazing animation. And now I want to bake this. So we go and save this sequencer. And then we go and add the take recorder. Windows, Cinematics, take recorder. We go into here. We change this to 240. We change our speed to half speed. We add our sources, which is this character here. We add our level sequence. Plus there. It should be a couple of them. Which one was this one called? I think it was just called new level sequence. And then also got to add in the cube. Like that. So now let's record all of those. Go into simulate mode and press record. Amazing. Stop that. And we can go to that asset now. Double click on there. And then turn off simulate. And it will now. As you can see, I can just keep going in my own little world for hours. But now you have two methods of doing ragdoll. You've got the Manny simple version, retargeting your custom character onto that animation, or you can do it the proper way, and that is building a physics asset for your custom character, which is probably the best way to do it if you're doing lots of animation. So if you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching. And if you like this sort of content, I've got a video here all about how I do my green screen inside of Unreal Engine and making my virtual production, offline virtual production movies. Also, if there's enough demand, I might make a video about the opening sequence that I did on this video with the ragdoll and showing you how to put it into the environment and all of those fun things. And this time I was using a little treadmill, so I got more of a dynamic move. Anyway, nerding out. I'll see you next time. Bye.